There's a story told of Albert Einstein when he was traveling by train to Princeton. As he was sitting there, the conductor came along and began punching tickets. Einstein couldn't find his ticket, began to panic a little bit, but the conductor said, "Dr. Einstein, I know who you are. It's okay, don't worry about it." And he began moving down the line, punching other tickets. As he looked back, he saw Einstein standing up, rifling through his jacket and his pants pocket, looking for his ticket. The conductor knew he was quite concerned, and he came back and he said, "Dr. Einstein, please, I know who you are. We all know who you are. Don't worry about it." And he began moving down the line again a third time. As he got to the end of the train car, he looked back, and now Einstein was on his hands and knees, digging under his chair, looking for his ticket, rifling through his briefcase. And again, the conductor came back, "Dr. Einstein, I know who you are. Please, don't worry about it." Einstein stood up, brushed himself off, and said, "Young man, I too know who I am. What I don't know is where I'm going." Have you ever felt that way? You know who you are in life, but you're just not quite sure where you're going. Having no purpose can create a similar dilemma in our chambers. Without purpose, we can somehow go adrift. We can be lost at sea. We fail to chart a course. But every chamber is driven by something. Chambers can be driven by tradition. We might ask ourselves, why are we doing this the same way every year, year after year? Why? Because we're steeped in tradition. Some chambers are driven by finances. You know how that goes? We've got payroll to meet. We've got bills to pay. We have budgets that we're accountable to. We find ourselves at times raising money for our own organizations, failing to remember that we're supposed to be problem solvers in our community and creating an environment where our businesses can be successful. Some chambers, very few, as I said, very few, can be driven by events. Right? You know what that's like? If you have ever said to your staff leading up to an event, during an event, or shortly after an event, "If we ever do another event, I am going to throw up." Chambers at some point need to become focused on being driven by purpose. Purpose-driven chambers are better at making decisions. Purpose-driven chambers can allocate time and dedicate resources to the right areas of their chamber and their programs. Purpose-driven chambers are able to allocate the time that's necessary wherever it's needed, and they can be flexible and nimble enough to make that work. When we fail to have purpose, we can find ourselves adrift, uncertain, and headed for uncharted waters. In 2002, Pastor Rick Warren from Southern California at Saddleback Church wrote a book called The Purpose-Driven Life. It was a bestseller. What a lot of people don't know, that was in 1995, Pastor Rick Warren wrote a book called The Purpose-Driven Church. It transformed how churches did church in our country. The basis of his book was 5 areas of purposes regarding ministry. 5 ministry purposes is what he talked about. And he said if churches would just simply apply these 5 purposes, not only would they be healthier organizations, but they would be more successful. Well, in relating that to the chamber world, we too have 5 purposes. And of course, we know what those are. Our purposes are creating a strong local economy, developing networking opportunities. What are they here? Representing the interests of business with government, create a strong local economy, political action, and promoting the community. We just simply need to work that plan. Work those purposes. We can become the 3C chambers that we were intended to be if we simply work those purposes going into the future. But we have to work the plan. It's sort of like the young lady who brought her fiancé home to meet her mother and father for the first time. The mom was quite skeptical, and she said to her husband, "Find out everything you can about him." So after dinner, the dad invited this young man into his study and began asking him questions. He said, "What do you do for work?" The young man said, "Sir, I'm a seminary student. I study Scripture." And the dad said, "Well, that's just great. Are you going to be able to buy a ring for my daughter?" And the young man said, "Sir, I'm going to study Scripture and believe that God will provide." The dad said, "Well, that's just great. How about a house? Will you be able to afford to buy a house?" The young man said, "Sir, I believe God will provide." "What about children? Can you raise children? Are you going to be able to afford to raise kids?" And again, the young man said, "Sir, I'm going to study Scripture and believe God will provide." All night long, the dad kept asking one question after another. All night long, the young man just simply said, "God will provide." Well, the evening came to an end. They left, and the mom turned to the dad and said, "What'd you find out?" The dad said, "Well, he's got no job and he's got no plan, but the good news is he thinks I'm God." We just need to work the plan, and when we do, we'll have good success. Going forward into the future, we can't leave these purposes behind. And in doing so, what we have is I have 3 R's that I want to share with you, as just like our first speaker did. These will be different words for these 3 R's, but if you apply these, I think we'll have greater success in working our purposes. The first one is we have to review. We've always got to review what we've done in order to keep it fresh and make sure that it's relevant. One of the things we've got to do in our review process is making sure that our value propositions, our events, our activities align with our purposes. And if they don't, we might need to have a difficult conversation about how we go forward. We then have to revamp. After we review what we've been doing, occasionally revamping these isn't a bad thing. If they don't align, can we adjust them? Can we tweak them slightly? What is it that we can do to keep them fresh? Let's never let them just get stale and think that they will always be good because they've always been good. In his book, I think it was Alex Legge, in his book, Making Remarkable, said, "Constant changes and adaptations to the value propositions are not just expected, but they should be embraced." We should be embracing change and making sure that as we review our value propositions, that we're making whatever adjustments are necessary. And then, worst case scenario, if we need to, we might simply need to remove what we've been doing. Some of them don't apply. Some of them don't align. Some of them are no longer relevant. Then we can remove those things from our arsenal and become more relevant in the things that we do. I made a quick chart. You can download this chart. This is sort of an evaluation form where you can list the purposes, list your event activities, your value proposition, rate them on a scale of 1 to 5 or whatever scale you want to use. You can then determine, do you need to revamp them or simply remove them? And in some cases, you can find yourself freed up by just simply removing some of those events. The fact of the matter is that, let me go back. The fact of the matter is we have to continually be working, making sure that we're doing the things that are necessary to stay fresh and relevant. And as long as we're doing that, as long as we're continually moving forward, we'll make good progress. There is a nautical term in the sailing world called kedging. Kedging is typically what happens when a boat or a ship runs aground. Sailors from the larger ship or boat will get into a smaller craft, and they'll take with them a kedge anchor. Attached to the kedge anchor is a line, and on the other line is attached to the boat, like you see here. The kedge anchor is then taken out away from the boat in the direction they want that boat to move. They drop the kedge anchor into the sea until it attaches to the seabed, and then someone on board begins to work the winch, and they slowly begin to move the boat or the ship in the direction of the kedge anchor. That is called kedging. Some chambers are actually moving in the right direction. They're sailing in the right direction, guided by these 5 purposes. Some of our chambers will need to take these 5 purposes and place them in the seabed of your community and then begin moving your organization in that direction. Set sail to become a purpose-driven chamber. If you don't, what can happen is we might suffer from what the great 20th century philosopher once said, Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra, of course, was the former player and coach of the New York Yankees, and he said, if we don't know where we're going, we might end up somewhere else. Thank you.